and welcome to another installment of Bring the Fire. Today I'm joined by Alandra Markman. Alandra has a truly harrowing story to tell. He grew up in a satanic family and suffered unimaginable abuse during his childhood. He's found the courage to speak out about his life, and it's a privilege to have him join us for Bring the Fire. Alandra, thank you so much for coming on. You were born into a satanic family, which as a sentence, I don't know what that is, basically. It might sound like a weird point, but it's kind of like a satanic family. What is that? Someone that sacrifices animals, someone that just reads particular books on Satanism. It's kind of quite a broad thing. What are your earliest memories of that?
Yeah, the underground religion of Satanism is quite different from anything that you'll find in a public book. You know, a publicly available book is not going to share in detail the practices of the underground satanic religion, because all of them are immoral and illegal. So public information is scarce. What we have mostly comes from survivors. You know, the survivors tend to be discredited, and it's a very hard journey to try to get the information out there. But basically, this is a family doing a lot of illegal things that we might associate with organized crime, including rape and murder and all kinds of psychological manipulation.
Well, it might sound like a stupid question, but what was your childhood like? Was it normal in the sense that you would go to school, you would have friends, and then there was just this separate life that was going on behind closed doors that maybe other people didn't know about?
Yeah, basically that. It's a double life. Sometimes I refer to it as front life and back life. They split you up into alters, so you have dissociative identity disorder with different personalities. And the goal for the handlers, the people causing this condition in people, is that those alters are not aware of one another and they function separately. And the handlers control some of the alters that show up in back life. And in front life, you have your own personality, more or less, and you do normal things like going to school.
When did you escape this life? Were you already in adulthood, or was it something? I'm just wondering if the authorities, although there's a lot to know about them, of course, but the authorities were in any way involved in your childhood.
They were involved in a negative sense as some of the perpetrators. So yeah, authorities were very involved. Police and military and government people were very involved as perpetrators, not as helpers.
So do you know what? I was going to sound surprised then. I was going to say I was surprised. And then actually, but from my experience of people I've spoke to over the years that tell these stories, some of them were police officers actually that were good and were trying to break up these satanic rings and stuff. There's quite a few up in Scotland. These were the ones that I knew about. And they said it was not some weirdo in his basement. It was the local lawyer. It was the doctor. Was that what it was where you were as well? It was the stand-up members of society.
Yes, people of social standing and prestige, and a lot of them have very outwardly commendable front life roles. You know, they can be anything, as you mentioned, lawyers, doctors, priests, whatever. In my case, there are a lot of people in the entertainment industry, a lot of actors and producers and people associated with Hollywood, and a lot of political people. Yeah, so they're very, very public-facing people with a lot of social status.
So are these people that you would see today, maybe show up on your TV screen, or maybe, in an old film if they're older, generations and stuff? These people that you would recognize and go, I've seen that guy firsthand or that woman firsthand.
Yeah, a lot of them. Not all, but a lot.
How do you process that? I'm just thinking in my head, as someone fortunately doesn't have any experience in this, that I would imagine any time one of these people appeared on my TV screen, like, the TV remote would be going through the screen. Is there a way that you still feel like that?
Well, that comes back to split awareness, because if I'm just in my front life alter, if I'm in my conscious self while I was enslaved, seeing one of my perpetrators on television, for instance, which was not an uncommon occurrence, I might have a really awful feeling in my gut, but I would rationalize it and explain it away, and I would never actually connect it to the experience that gave me the feeling. So that's dissociation.
Was there a because obviously you don't disassociate now, so do you have full memories then of what's gone on? Was there something that happened to trigger that, almost to bring everything back to you?
Yeah, it's a complex story. I never entirely had all my memories suppressed. Mind control is not perfect. Alters do talk to one another inside the system, independent of the handlers. So things get out inside of people. Things I would have awarenesses that I was not supposed to have. That was always the case. Although before I got free, they did as much as they could to obscure my conscious memory, including pretty extensive electroconvulsive therapy treatments. So there was a lot of brain damage caused and a lot of chemical treatments that they did to try to block the memory. And they were partly successful. I was in a state of, largely a state of amnesia about most of my childhood when I got out. I was around 16 when I got out. And I really, honest to goodness, couldn't remember much of anything. I would give very vague answers if questions ever came up. I was barely verbal at the time. I was extremely shell-shocked. So it took a number of years, probably 16 to 23 was a process of like getting grounded and starting to get memories back. Yeah.
So what got you out at 16 years of age? Were you essentially let go, freed, or was it an escape that you had to carry out?
It was both. It came from within, and it also came from the cult. So I've told this story a few times, but basically I was being groomed to be a handler myself. I was supposed to be a master programmer, and I was abusing and programming others for quite a long time. 8 or 9 up to 16, I was very active in torturing and programming other people, doing a lot of things that I'm not proud of, and working on all sorts of people, other children, working on adults. So I was on a training track to be a master handler and to basically carry on the family tradition. I had the psychic skills that they were looking for to get inside of people's heads and break them. So they were looking for me to do that more professionally in a more serious way. But there came a point in my training where my consent was necessary or it wasn't going to work. Essentially, for the role that they needed me in, I had to consent. They offered me a lot to do it. They offered me everything they could, all the wealth I could dream of, all the sexual partners I could dream of, basically all the social status, everything that, an ego-based person might want, they offered to me. But thankfully, I'm not an ego-based person primarily. I'm a very old soul with lots of lifetimes under my belt. So they weren't really going to attract me with any of that kind of stuff. And they couldn't really keep me with torture at that point. And there are certain soul contracts, as I've come to understand in the greater universe, where people really can't be killed if it's not their time to go. So that was the case for me, and I'm very grateful for this. There's a combination of reasons why that was, and I don't even know all the reasons. This is in the hands of Creator. This is way above my pay grade of consciousness. But basically, there was a combination of circumstances where they couldn't kill me and they couldn't use me. So yes, they let me go.
When you refer to torture, I mean, what are we talking here in torture? Because obviously you've mentioned about being able to get inside people's heads. So I guess there is a psychological torture element to that. But was there a physical torture element that you were put through and that you were, obviously, like you were saying, groomed to then carry out on others?
Yes, every physical torture imaginable. Some of it has entered public consciousness in the form of, medieval Inquisition torture machines, the rack. And I mean, that's just a taste of what the satanic cults have been doing since time immemorial, essentially. So every form of physical torture is included. Just off the top of my head, I can list temperature shock, burning and freezing, electrocution of all kinds, many different kinds of electrocution, local and throughout the body. Many different types of needles are used. They do a lot of different things that cause maximum pain and minimal physical evidence. So, they're concerned not to leave suspicious bruises. If the person has a front life like I did, and I'd be in school the next day, they wouldn't want me showing up with a black eye. So, they have very refined methods to cause maximum nerve pain and minimal body damage.
What is the force behind this in terms of what drags people into Satanism? Because obviously it starts somewhere, right? Is my logic on it. I understand it goes through generations, but it has to come from something and have an overarching force behind it. What is that?
Yeah. Evil is part of the human condition, so it's quite universal. If it's not in this form, then it's in another. It is very organized at our particular time in history and in our particular society as human beings. It's extremely organized, and the evil ones generally have the upper hand in terms of social status, in terms of political organization. They hold most of the cards most of the time in our current system. And it's been that way, really, again, for a very long time. This goes back to the beginnings of Western civilization and beyond that. It goes back to Atlantis and Lemuria. It goes, there's a very long and complicated story of humans on Earth, and we're only told a tiny fraction of it in our conventional education systems, which are designed to keep us in the dark. So it's been around a very, very long time.
Do you think a part of it is that obviously those, higher levels will identify those maybe on lower levels and elevate them if they are in the same cult? But also there's a little bit, because I'm just saying, when you mention the fact that these people end up in positions of power and whatever, is part of that, do you think, that they are so ruthless that, for me, if I want to be a billionaire, well, I'm going to have to crush a lot of people beneath me to do that, and I'm not willing to do it, and I'm not a billionaire, of course. Yeah. But others would be. They don't care about the emotional side of it and other people.
Yeah, our social system rewards sociopathy and psychopathy currently. So, that's just obvious from a very armchair analysis that our society is rewarding people who should be punished and punishing people who should be rewarded. Our value system is very inverted. Empaths tend to fail miserably in the marketplace, and sociopaths tend to succeed. So that tells you something about how the system is engineered.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll be happy to be unsuccessful then. If I ever become successful, then I'll start to question who I am. Because you were talking about the organization, obviously the level of organization of all of this. Was your family then part of a network of other families, and they would interlock, maybe not in the front life as you call it, but in the back life, these families would interlock together?
Absolutely. Yeah. Most of the really high level Satanist families are related to each other. They come from just a few bloodlines. So most of us are cousins. It's very incestuous.
Could you track your family back to people, that maybe were not significant, because it's the wrong term, but, people within history maybe, or within politics, or as you've mentioned, Hollywood and stuff like that? Can you track your family back into that? Yeah.
I can. My living family members are not conscious of this, but I've done a little bit of research, and most of my information comes from meditation. I'm a very spiritual person, and I do a lot of channeling of information from other planes of being. So that's what's helped me to be grounded and have a decent perspective on this, and not just be a crazy, traumatized person. Anyway, so I've learned that my family goes back mostly to the Merovingian line. So this is French royalty, and at least to the early Middle Ages of French royalty. So that there's a pretty direct connection there for me.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me at all. Like, when you think about the Middle Ages and about, even the Dark Ages, the medieval, some of the things that people were capable of doing to other people we would look at now and see as abhorrent. But then it was like the rack, for instance. You mentioned the rack, like forms of torture like that that's what happened. You got hung, drawn, and quartered. Whereas now it's almost like that's not gone away, right? It's just not socially acceptable, so it's gone underground.
Yeah, basically.
There's so much of this as well. With your family, I've seen a couple of podcasts that you've done with other people where you spoke about the fact that it was passed on through generations. And when I was listening to that, I was thinking that's extraordinary. Like but then when you've mentioned before about how you were almost groomed and tortured into then becoming the torturer, so it's almost like there's not a fault really necessarily on the next generation. They are a product of their abuse essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like any abuse, in more conventionally accepted abuse, the cycle continues unless someone stops it. It's not always the case that people who have been abused become abusers themselves, but it is very frequent with any kind of abuse, just ordinary emotional abuse included. Yeah.
Yeah. But you've broken that cycle though, which is great.
I certainly hope so. Yeah. To the best of my knowledge, I have. Yes.
Would you consider your family as odd in comparison to other families? Now, if you look at it, it's obviously like you said, they're functioning society. But did you look at them and you could see through their front life that they weren't necessarily hiding it that well once you've had the experience that you've had to see through it?
Well, in the case of my family, it was not that hidden. I grew up alone with my mother, and my mother was a diagnosed mentally ill person, and she was a front life sex worker. So she was not a person of status at all. It's not like my immediate family had any of this social privilege, really. More extended members of my family did, but in the most immediate sense, I grew up with my mother. And she was obviously unwell to anyone who was looking at her. So it wasn't exactly hidden on that level in my case.
Did you think that, her mental state was as a result of her of growing up in this family and I imagine experiencing this trauma?
Yes, indeed. My mother and my grandmother went to the same torture school, trauma-based mind control school, to become essentially blackmail agents and high-end sex workers within the cult. So they went to a satanic institution in Youngstown, Ohio, in the Midwestern United States. And they were made into very deranged people by this training. And it was pretty obvious for both of them, more obvious in my mother. My mother was outwardly mentally ill. My grandmother was more stable, and I didn't have a lot of acquaintance with her in front life. So it felt more distant, but they come from this lineage of essentially black magicians and sex workers used for satanic high magic.
Was the role as a sex worker, do you think that was to hook people in as well? That she would, I'm just thinking like that she would be maybe sent to basically trap people and entrap people with that.
Yeah, that's how this body that I am currently living in came about. My father was one of her clients, so here I am.
Did you ever meet him?
I did a few times. He's still around. Yeah.
Oh, he's still around. So does he know any of this as well? Was he involved in it?
I don't know to what degree he's conscious of his involvement. I've attempted to tell him a few times, and he's in denial in his front self that I relate to. So I don't know what's going on in his deeper mind, how much awareness he actually has. It's always a guessing game, unfortunately. But I've done my best to share.
In terms of the rest of your family, what happened to them? Obviously, because at 16 years old, you're away from it, but 16-year-old, that's still a kid to be away from your mum and your dad and stuff like that. So
yeah,
what happened to your family when you left?
My mother, without the they'd sort of set her up to feed on my life force and find her mental stability through me and sort of live vicariously through me. This is not unique to a cult situation. A lot of emotionally unstable mothers with borderline personality disorder do this kind of thing. So it's not specifically unique to this setting. But when I left and I got out of the cult, my mother really started to degrade and was never truly mentally stable after that. She spent the last 13 years of her life in a mental institution and committed suicide. And a few others of my family suffered similar fates, unfortunately.
How do you feel about that? Like, it sounds like a stupid thing to ask, but I mean, because obviously it's your mum, right? But at the same, and their family members, but at the same time, because of the abuse and because of everything else, like you must feel torn maybe in how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's quite devastating. It's a very lonely experience, obviously. I look for chosen family where I can, as does anyone who comes from, an unsavory family background. I do my best is really what I can say. I've never been torn in my loyalty. I mean, I know I've been loyal to Creator and loyal to life, and anything that goes against Creator and against life, I am disloyal to. So that was always very clear cut for me and made it impossible to have intimacy with my family after I got free.
What did you do at 16? Because like I say, 16 is a kid. So in terms of how you were able to, fend for yourself financially, how to, clothe yourself and get a roof on your head, how did you do that?
I had a relatively easy time of it, as these things go. I didn't really spend much time out on the streets, as an urchin or what have you. I was taken in by a family at that time. My best friend in high school, secondary school, took me in, and I actually finished the last part of high school living with his family. So I was quite literally rescued in that way.
That's amazing, because I bet there are so many that don't have that.
Yeah, I'm extremely lucky in many respects.
How widespread would you say this is? Because obviously I'm talking to you, and people watching this are probably thinking, this is a harrowing story of a very isolated situation in a very isolated area of America. But, in my personal experience from talking to people, I've spoken to people all over the world. So it's clearly wide enough spread to be, all over the place. How common is this in the sense of, is it every town? Is it every village? Is it every hamlet? Like how widespread is it?
It's basically everywhere, every country, every city, certainly every major city, and some minor ones that you wouldn't expect. It really depends on what the magical identity of the land is. So this cult is very tuned into all the magical information about the land. They're very tuned into the ley lines and all this subtle information about the earth, which we don't really get taught in our mainstream education. We have to sort of stumble upon, as individual spiritual explorers. But the cult has a very exact and systematic knowledge of all these things. And really their aim is to enslave Earth herself. So they're using humans to do that, partly in the bigger picture. And so anywhere the earth energy is very, very present, when you have these nodes on the earth that are especially full of life force, there you will find the cult trying to suppress that and co-opt that.
Which would make sense then if you had somewhere like, Jerusalem and these other places in the Middle East that are so powerful in terms of that there's so much war and conflict and death and misery in those places, that this would be the same cult essentially carrying that out, wouldn't it, in a different way?
Yes, they're basically responsible for all the major conflicts on the planet.
So it's interesting because where I live in Derbyshire, it's a beautiful county, lots of hills and stuff and loads of countryside, but there's lots of ancient stone circles, and it's clearly quite a powerful place. And I remember a few years ago they did a national consensus where you'd fill it in, you'd say what religion you were, and they were working out, what percentage of the UK was Christian, and how the Muslim population had gone up and all this kind of stuff. And the highest population of people that said, at least, I mean, some people could have been saying it for a joke, but the highest percentage of people that said they identified as a Satanist was Derbyshire. And I remember at the time, because this was a few years back, thinking, well, that's strange. And now listening to you, I'm thinking, well, actually, if there's so many stone circles and so much powerful stuff here in terms of that, well, that would make total sense then.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah, my little town is, I live in a hamlet of about 3,000 people in Mount Shasta, California. And yet the cult presence here is quite substantial because it's such a major part of the earth grids.
Can you tell when you meet people? Like, I know obviously if you recognize people that from the past or whatever, but I mean, if you just bumped into someone, say now in a cafe or something, because you're probably so in tuned into this, would you be able to, just from a look in the eye, maybe be like, hang on?
Yeah,
you would. Yeah.
My most striking one in recent memory was I encountered a young woman that I believe is one of my daughters in the local diner in my town. I have, unfortunately, a lot of children from this experience. I was used as a breeder. And so I have a lot of adult children now out in the world. And I believe I just met one. I think she was working at my local diner and we had a brief conversation. I never saw her again after that. I don't know if she's still enslaved or if she's free. I hope she's well. All I can really do is pray for her, but that was quite a shocking experience.
I can't imagine like how that must have felt. Was there part of you that wanted to say something?
Absolutely. Yeah. But I didn't want to shock her too much and end the conversation prematurely. So
I could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm obliged to play it cool in many situations when I really do not want to.
Is there part of you that would, because I know obviously where you're a spiritual guy, I can tell that. And so Mount Shasta obviously is a very famous place and I can see why you would be connected to that place. But because there is, as you've said yourself, like quite a high percentage of these people there, is that, do you find that difficult? Is there part of you that's like, I want to be away from this?
Yes, it's very difficult. But the good outweighs the bad, basically. Mount Shasta is the root chakra of the planet. It's a great place for grounding. It's a place where the earth energies kind of really come out into the physical realm from the subtle realms. And I really like being here in that energy. It is co-opted. It's incredibly weaponized against the people. There are massive installations around the mountain to co-opt that energy and pervert it and send out false transmissions of false light and all this stuff. And it breaks my heart. It really does hurt a lot. But at the same time, I trust Earth, I trust the mountain, and the energy of Creator is always greater than the energy of those trying to manipulate what Creator has made.
In terms of that, how do you think that, or will it ever be eradicated, this kind of stuff?
Yes.
Do you think it's almost like a case of the more people that are aware of it, hence, I guess, why you're speaking out so much, that this can't go on in the shadows anymore because suddenly everyone knows, and that like light is the greatest disinfectant, right? So it's kind of, do you think that is how this turns, because it's a story as old as time, like you say, this is going back hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands and thousands of years. But it's so wrong.
It's very wrong. Yes, this is coming out into public awareness. There have been many waves of disclosure in the past, from the 70s up to the present, especially. The marches in Belgium around Michael Dutroux were very inspiring. In the late 90s, early 2000s especially, there was a groundswell of survivors coming out and people making disclosures and certain aspects of law enforcement taking it seriously and people getting mobilized. Unfortunately, a lot of that movement has been effectively nullified at this time, and it's back to individual survivors who find the courage to tell their stories, to try to bring this into public awareness. it's not supposed to be just survivors doing this. We're supposed to have lots of allies. And that was the case in the late 90s and early 2000s. Unfortunately, a lot of it was suppressed, but these things do come in waves. There will be new waves of disclosure, new waves of survivors. I'm one of many. I really don't think I'm unique. But it is a kind of a downtime for the disclosure movement. And so I perhaps appear more unique than I actually am.
When you look at things like the Epstein files, like I know like people have this attitude like with Epstein that it just he was trafficking girls for fun and his own pleasure and whatever, and they see it as wrong and abhorrent, but I don't think they connect it into the darkness of Satanism. Would you look at someone like him and the people around him and go, no, these are the same people?
Of course, yes, yeah. Jeffrey Epstein in the U.S. is very much what Michael Dutroux was in Belgium. It's a very similar recipe. It's a very similar kind of story. And the unredacted files are very clear, indicating a lot of satanic practice and a lot of transhumanist agendas. So, it's all there.
What do you think they're hoping to achieve on the, is it just to basically crush everything good? Like you said, like in terms of entrap the earth, is it just a case of doing such abhorrent things and bringing such misery and darkness that essentially will extinguish the light? But then my question is then beyond that, everyone's in darkness. What is it they're hoping to achieve?
Yeah. It's a complex game, and I don't claim to understand all the details. But I do basically subscribe to the New Age kind of narrative that Earth herself is evolving beyond all of this. Earth's vibration is raising. Earth is entering into a higher consciousness. Some humans are going with her, and some are not. The basic agenda of the cult people is to ensnare and enslave as many of us as they can and keep us from traveling with Earth as she ascends and bring those souls that are in human bodies to darker realms. But Earth herself is done with all of this. She's been done for a long time, and she's evolving past it. And I hope as many of us as possible will go with her.
I sincerely hope so too. I do see like a level of, I know a lot of people talk about the awakening and people have different views of what that is and what that means and what's behind it. But I do see a change in people, over the last few years. People are starting to open their eyes to things that they would have never opened their eyes to before. Have you found that as well in your own work, in your own experience?
Yes, the call of the earth is irresistible. We all feel it in our bodies. It can't be denied. Our intuitions are getting way stronger. Our perceptions are getting way bigger, just as a natural thing, without any discipline, without any teaching. I mean, those of us who are pursuing various disciplines may have a leg up here, but Earth herself is upgrading the human race. And a lot of us are entering new awareness spontaneously. I do trust that process.
What do you think the Earth looks like in, so beyond this point? So, where the Earth, as you said, it's changing vibrationally. People are going with it. They're trying to obviously ensnare people away from it. But what does the future look like, do you think, 50, 100 years from now in terms of what it would be like to be a human? What you're capable of, essentially.
Yeah. I'm really not sure. It depends how much of our sovereignty we give up to all this AI crap, which is, claiming human consciousness and trying to replace human intelligence and all that. It really depends how this goes and how we evolve with our technology. I do believe the technology is a natural part of our evolution, so I'm not a Luddite by any means. There are positive aspects to everything in creation, even the most diabolical. So, there's always a silver lining somewhere. I'm hoping that humanity is able to advocate for more of its sovereignty and to get free of, just the matrix of soul death that our phones are sucking us into. We'll see how it goes. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I'm optimistic. I have the same attitude towards technology. I think as long as humans are using technology and technology is not using humans, then, you know,
Yeah.
well, we're talking through technology. If it wasn't for technology, I'd be shouting very loud, but I don't think you'd hear me. So it would, so everything, serves a purpose for sure. Where can people find you and learn more about you and more about your story, and also more about what you do now? Because obviously I see you, a lot. I've seen you on a lot of podcasts talking about lots of different things.
Yeah. Yeah, some of my interviews get a lot stranger than this one. There are many metaphysical and extraterrestrial dimensions to my experience that, in the right setting, I'll get into. Many different dimensions of enslavement out there. Basically, I work as a coach and a healer. I teach meditation. I host groups that people can drop into. I have my own YouTube channel, which is just my name, youtube.com/@Alandra Markman, my full name spelled out. I have some guided meditations on there. I have other interviews, and I do one-on-one sessions with people of various kinds, coaching, healing, clearing, shamanic work, that kind of holistic healing stuff. My website for that is antarianjourneys.com, ANTAREAN journeys. Antares is a star in the Scorpio constellation. It's a place where I get a lot of positive spiritual transmissions from. And so I work with some of those in my healing practice. I've had a lot of training in meditation and various holistic healing modalities. So that's my focus.
Is there just finally then, because you've sparked my interest now, is there an extraterrestrial element to this then, in terms of these satanic cults, who they're serving and all the rest of it?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, I've gone into much more depth in some other interviews on that particular angle. It can be edgy. There's a lot of fear instilled in us of the other in all forms. If we can't trust other humans, how can we trust some creature from beyond Earth? A lot of fear programming holding people back. But by and large, yes, I have a lot of interactions with ETs. I consider the vast majority of them benevolent, and they add a lot to my life. They're very spiritual. They understand our spirituality, everything we do to get grounded, meditation, prayer, like just healthy routines, exercise, all the things that humans do to stay healthy, they basically also do, and they support these practices. And so there's a wider community of holistic healing beyond the immediate human community. Yeah.
That's amazing. So the wide majority, you say, are okay, but there's obviously an element that is not. Well, I guess that's the same as humanity, right?
This galaxy and this universe are incredibly vast domains where Creator has experimented with all kinds of life forms. The vast majority of them are serving Creator in a conscious, direct manner. Like the vast majority of life is incredibly good, incomprehensibly good. So that's where, that's another place I draw inspiration from, and it helps me not go crazy.
That's great. Well, I'd love to, if you'd be willing, maybe have another conversation in the future that is just solely focused on that part of it, because I know, our members here at Ickonic they're massively interested in that extraterrestrial element of it, for sure.
Sure.
If you'd be willing, that would be fantastic.
I'd be delighted. Yeah. No, I think it's delightful that there are channels like yours now where these disparate narratives can kind of talk to one another. And, we can actually come together with some coherent grassroots narratives for humanity and not be boxed off in like, oh, you're talking about Satanists, that's fantasy, or you're talking about aliens, that's sci-fi. Like, you can't mix your genres, it's very silly. I really just want to have all the truth out, all together in a flowing way. That's what I aspire to. And I'd be delighted to, go more into that angle sometime.
That would be great. Let's do that. I love that terminology of mixing genres. Yeah. I like mixing genres. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's how we find the answer, because this is the thing, isn't it? The truth isn't black and white anyway. Like, life isn't black and white. And so if you're going to box everything off, you're never going to get to the bottom of it. That's the point, isn't it? Maybe that's why they want us to do that.
True. Yeah. This hyper compartmentalization is sort of a mass personality fragmentation. Just as an individual is fragmented into the dissociative identity disorder parts, humanity as a whole is fragmented. This hyper compartmentalization serves to keep us enslaved on a collective level.
Absolutely. Well, I'll do is I'll basically, as soon as I come out of here, I'll be straight on the email, try and find another date. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It's been great to talk to you. And do you know what's crazy as well? Like, obviously, like I said, I've watched your podcast before, and the subject matter of Satanism and ritual abuse is dark. And you know, I'll level with you. I came in here and I sat down and I thought, right, okay, you know, this is going to be tough. But at the same time, I'm finishing this conversation actually with an element of hope and of, you know, encouraged by the idea of this raising of Earth's vibration and this unity that will come off the back of that. And I didn't expect to feel light after a conversation about this subject matter. I really didn't.
I'm so glad to hear that. Sounds like I'm doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've had a therapy session now, so that's amazing, mate. Thank you so much, and as always, thank you to everyone at home for tuning in. We'll be back again next Sunday when we'll be bringing the fire once again. Good day.